Lecture 14 on Leisure and Contemplation. This is the last lecture, and it is not about grammar or logic or rhetoric. It is about what is the point of anything. Is that true? Yeah, kind of. This is sort of a lecture on the meaning of life, in a way, because what leisure means, leisure does not mean I don't know, what do you picture when you think of leisure? You think of like a dude sitting on a chair like that and like smoking a pipe and like reading the newspapers like, oh, I'm a man of leisure. I don't know, something like that. Not exactly. That's not really what's going on. Leisure in the ancient Greek world all the way through the Middle Ages, especially, I mean, this is a really good book, but I'm not just going to rely on him for today. Leisure is not simply the lack of work. It's not simply just kind of sitting around. Leisure is why we work in the first place. What is the point of working? Well, the point of working is to make money. Okay, what's the money for? Well, the money is for me to pay my rent and to buy groceries and to keep the air conditioning on. Okay, what are those things for? Well, the rent is so that I have a roof over my head. Okay, so why are we doing? Well, why are we eating? Why are we doing anything that we're doing? Well, a lot of it is just to sort of continue to be alive. Okay, that's fine. That's a totally legitimate answer. I just don't want to starve, and so I need to work. Great. That's one of the important reasons to work. Isn't there more to life, though, than just not dying? And isn't there a greater purpose to work than, I don't know what, not being bored, not being kind of idle, not feeling useless? There's a kind of internal, and Pieper kind of appeals to, he kind of pokes at certain spots in your heart, and you might not feel the same way about certain parts of this that others do, but I don't know. But you guys are a lot younger than I am, but in my generation there was a kind of feeling of you had to kind of earn your keep, and there's something true about that. I don't want to be a freeloader. I don't want to feel like I'm entitled and everybody owes me anything. So, and I do want to contribute. I want to kind of make the world a better place. I don't like the idea of other people just doing everything for me and me doing nothing for them. So even aside from all of the sort of necessities of life, there's a house and there's food and there's whatever. There's also this, I think, a true desire, a real desire that's legitimate of wanting to contribute something to other people. And in order to do that, you got to do some work. I want to make somebody's life better. I need to help them move. Helping them move is work. It's not leisure. Okay, so there's this sort of various needs, the various sort of requirements for working. But I'm going to go back to this other question. Why do we do it? What's the point of all of it? And Pieper sets up this kind of dichotomy. If you want to go to the earlier in the class, he sets up a disjunctive proposition. Either we live to work, or we work to live. If we live to work, that means work is our purpose. That's kind of a dark thing. Like, we're made, like, our entire purpose is to work. That's kind of a, and he relates this in towards the end of the book to the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus is this kind of Greek myth where, this is page 69 of the reading, of the guy that's pushing a boulder up a hill, and then the boulder rolls downhill, and then he pushes it back up, and the boulder rolls back down. If our purpose is nothing other than to work, that's what our life is. And if you feel that way, about life already while you're even still in college, maybe this is the book for you. Maybe this is the idea for you. So if we live, if our existence is for the purpose of work, that's what we are. We're that dude pushing the boulder up and letting it roll down and just doing that over and over again every day to no end and for no reason. If we work in order to live, if, as I was saying earlier, we make money so that we can have some kind of comfortable life and we've got a roof over our heads and air conditioning and food and so on. We do that in order to live, but then what is the point of life? It's not work. It's something else. I'm going to use a little bit more Aristotle than Pieper did. Pieper kind of went about it in his own way. I'm going to kind of bring in, this is the first book of the Nicomachean Ethics. First and second book. I'm drawing ideas from those two parts of Aristotle's book on the ethics. If there is a purpose to life, Aristotle makes this point. Well, what type of life are we talking about? We're talking about particularly a human life. I don't know what the purpose of a cat's life is, but I would suppose there's something special about being a cat, and that type of activity that's special to being a cat is what's fulfilling to cats. It's what sort of what they're for. I don't know, like knocking things off of a table or whatever. So Aristotle says, if there's something, if there's a meaning, if there's a purpose to human life, it's probably going to be something that's particular to human beings. It's whatever is sort of special about us, that kind of activity that's special to us, that's going to have something to do with the meaning of life, the purpose of what human life is about. And he kind of goes up, kind of makes a couple of different tangents and side arguments, but he ends up coming to this thing that one of the things that seems like is special about human beings among all animals is that we can understand and think in a way different than even other somewhat smart animals. There's something sort of different about the way that we think and understand things. There also seems to be something special about the way that we care about others and live in community. There are other animals live in community. Other animals seem to have affection, maybe even love for each other or for other, your dog loves you or something like that. There are other sort of versions of that. Still, there seems to be something special about the way human beings do it. There does seem to be a kind of at least recognition among other animals. Your dog recognizes you and can distinguish you from others. It probably recognizes other dogs, so it can recognize a kind of thing as well. But still, seems to be something different, distinct about the way that human beings do that. What exactly that might be, it's the kind of topic of another class. But for now, I'm going to take it for granted. You can take it or leave it. It's up to you. Whatever that special thing is that human beings can do, Aristotle is going to say, I bet the point of human life is to do that. If that's the case, that would mean that the purpose of life is to do something like think. Now, what Josef Pieper in this book makes it a point to do is we have in our, I guess I just have to call it our capitalist-driven society, in our money-driven, consumerist, sort of greedy kind of culture, we have made everything about work, including thinking. And he makes this, he kind of talks for a while in this essay about intellectual work, part 2, chapter 2. He talks about intellectual work and what a kind of irony that is. And that even philosophy, and he kind of blames this on Immanuel Kant, that even philosophy, the sort of most free and liberal of all the possible activities that human beings can do, the thing that you do just to do it, just for its own sake, even that activity, according to Kant, I don't know if really it's all Kant's fault, but partially it's his. According to him, even that has become kind of laborious. Pieper is offering a different kind of picture, and it was the picture of a lot of Western civilization up until the last few hundred years. At the very first day of class, I mentioned what liberal versus servile, what that distinction means. A servile art or activity is one that you do in order to gain something else by it. So if you're going to make money off of it, it's a servile art. If you're going to do it to produce some artifact, it's a servile art or a servile activity. Nothing bad about that at all. The word servile kind of has a bad tinge to it in current spoken English, but there's nothing bad about making things and doing things. There's nothing wrong with working to make money. But the difference between that and a liberal activity or a liberal art is the latter, the liberal arts, are the ones that you do just to do them. So why do you think, well, can you think in order to make money? Sure. But what's the point of it? It's the kind of thing that you do just to do it. And this is, I just want to give you an example of this to kind of, because this is kind of an alien idea to a lot of us. What does he mean by leisure? Leisure is what you do at the end of a long day of working, and you're done. That day's activity is done. You've gone home. The kids are taken care of. The house is clean. What do you do when you don't have to do anything else? I don't know. It sort of depends on the person, right? But let's say you go out and you sit on your porch, or you go out to your balcony, and you sit down on your balcony, and you just do this. You sit there and you just go like this. And you just kind of look. You're just kind of looking. And you're looking at a sunset, let's say. It's the end of the day and the sun is setting, and you're just looking at the colors. You're not painting it. You're not Instagramming it. You're not describing it in a poem. You're just sitting and looking at a sunset. And that's it. I hope you've done that. I don't do that as much as I should. That activity, that's what he's talking about. That's what leisure means. And one of the important points he's making in this book, number one, how are work and leisure related according to Pieper? We work so that we can have leisure. The real reason we do everything we do, all the laborious, strained stuff, is so that at some point we have the freedom to just do that, to just exist, realize that we exist, to just be in the world and appreciate the world that we have. Stop and smell the roses, so to speak. What's our problem as a 21st century go-get-'em society? Our problem is the second we get to that, and we've frantically been working all day, and we sit and we look at the sunset, what happens? What starts to creep in? Oh, let me get a quick picture of this so that I can post it on Instagram, so that I can get more Instagram followers, so that either I can gain some popularity or whatever, or I can get somebody's attention maybe, or I need my Instagram account to get big because it's part of this business that I'm starting. And so what we're doing is we're taking the thing that we're supposed to be doing for its own sake, and we're kind of degrading it, and we're making it for the sake of something else. And we're putting other things that are by nature lower than that act of awareness. And we're taking the act of awareness and kind of putting it lower, making it for the sake of those things that should be for the sake of that, should be for the sake of this moment of leisure that we have. Now, I gave the example of watching the sunset because I think that's something I hope a lot of you can relate to. But it could be other things too. It could be, it's not a business partnership, it's an actual friendship. You are just sitting and having a conversation with your friends. Not about work, not about school. You're not trying to get anything out of them. You're not trying to even date them. You're not nothing. You're just sitting and having a conversation with your friends. That's the kind of thing he's talking about. That is the reason why we work, so that we have a house, so that we can invite our friends over and just hang out with them. Let's just play a game of chess. Honestly, playing a video game. Now, video games can kind of take us away from reality into something else, but they can be a kind of modality of relaxation, of recreation. I'm not sure I would call them leisure, but I don't know. So leisure is not the same as just kind of sitting and having fun. It is that kind of awareness, that kind of contemplative activity, where we are just allowing ourselves to drink in the world. We're not trying to analyze it. We're not trying to peel it apart. We're not trying to profit off of it. We're just letting the world be the world, and we're letting ourselves be ourselves. And we are, the words that he uses throughout this book, we are passively receiving what the world is. Okay? It's a passive reception. We're not working. It's not a strain. It is, I'm just going to exist, but because of the kind of thing that I am, which is a human being, my existence is receptive to the existence of everything else. I can see and hear visible and audible things, but seeing is a receptive thing. You know, the photons or the light waves are received into my eye. They hit the back of my eye. They hit the retinas, the rods and the cones. It's a receptive. Even the physical seeing is a receptive thing. The mind is that kind of thing as well, or it can be. The mind can be this analytical, I'm going to break things down, I'm going to peel them apart, I'm going to make sure we can do that. But there's another kind of activity, which is just purely receptive. I'm just going to exist, and I'm just going to perceive and receive and passively, kind of gratefully, thankfully accept what reality is, and I'm going to accept what I am. That's what leisure is. And how are work and leisure related? According to Pieper, work is for the sake of leisure. What's the difference between ratio and intellectus? These are good Latin words. Ratio is rationality or reasoning, and I talked about this actually earlier in the class. Ratio is, this is on page 28 of the reading, the Middle Ages do distinguish between understanding as ratio and the understanding as intellectus. Ratio is the power of discursive, logical thought. So when I was saying you want to think in a straight line, that's ratio. When you're making an argument, when you don't know the answer yet and you're working to get to the answer, when you're trying to persuade, this is all ratio. This is all rationality, reasoning. You're going from one thing to another, to another, to another. It's a ladder, or it's a straight line, or something like that. There's a beginning and end. Intellectus, on the other hand, is the name for the understanding insofar as the capacity of simplex intuitus, a simple intuition, that of a simple vision, to which the truth offers itself like a landscape to the eye. So there's that other type of, and we'll just call it intellecting. To intellect is to just, let me just think about this. I just want to think about that. And sometimes you will be, even watching a movie or talking to a friend or listening to a lecture or reading a book, and somebody will just make a statement. They'll just say a sentence, and you're just like, whoa, hold on. Pause. And you click pause on the video. And you're just like, I just want to think about that. And maybe the person you're talking to is like, what, do you have a question? Do you not understand? Do you want me to explain it again? Do you disagree? No, it's none of those things. It's not a question. I just want to sit and think about that. That is intellecting. And again, that's the beautiful human activity. We do everything else so that we can do that. It sounds weird, right? That activity is the meaning of life. But I think it's true. I think everything that is true that we do just to do in life is related to that. It's kind of a version of that. I'm going to go and take an evening walk. I'm going to go on a vacation. Hopefully, again, he's making a critique here. What our culture has taught us is you go on vacation so you can rest and come back to work. No! You go to work so that you can go and see these beautiful places. You don't go for a walk so that you can come home and do some more work. You do that work so that you get some time to go for that nice quiet walk. You don't, I'm going to introduce another thing, pray, because Pieper goes eventually into prayer and worship in this. You don't pray, again, not ideally, so that, well, now I feel better, now I can get back to work and like I'm mentally and spiritually more there. No, you do all the stuff that you do so that you get some time to pray. That's the important thing. Those moments, talking to friends, having that time, smoking your pipe, or whatever it is, these things of like these moments of just, I am just existing and I'm glad to exist. That's why we do everything we do. That is the purpose of life, is that. Whether it's with friends and others and so on, whether it's prayer, it's something like that. Listening to music and I just want to enjoy the song. I'm not going to break it down because of a class I'm taking. I just want to enjoy this music. That's what it's all about. And now, as you just saw, there's all kinds of different sort of forms of that. Depending on your personality, you might be more into stories, into music, into silence. But in the end, he boils it down to kind of the quieter the thing is, the quieter that moment is, the more pure it is, the more pure of a contemplation it is. And that's really what we're talking about, is contemplation. And so music is an important part of it, and story, and and games and friends and all of this great stuff is an important part of it, and even sunsets or whatever. But the kind of quieter it is, the less is more. The less there is, the more it's just this act of contemplation, of existing and receiving existence. Now, that being said, there's a lot that gets in the way of that. And this idea of sloth or achedia, which he starts talking about several pages later. I want to give you a page number here. Oh, it's section 3, so page 43. This idea of sloth or achedia he mentions on page 44, is this inability to do that. And weirdly, we think of sloth as I'm just kind of sitting around doing nothing. Oh, that guy's slothful. No, not exactly. Sloth means I'm unable psychologically to just enjoy the moment. And either it can knock me into a kind of despair. Oh, I can just never, everything's just terrible and awful, and I'm just in this slump and I just can't get out of it. Or this kind of fear of a quiet moment causes us to always be working. And that's a real kind of spiritual condition. By the way, I'm not being dismissive of other possible psychological conditions that sometimes can be improved with practice or even with medication. I'm not talking about like ADD or ADHD or anything like that. I'm talking about something else, a spiritual reality where just try it. Try it even now if you want. Pause this video. Turn everything off. No phone, no music, no nothing. And no books. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at anything. Just try to just sit quietly and exist. See how long you last. If you get 5 minutes in, I'll be impressed. We are not built as a civilization right now. We're not built for that kind of thing. We're sort of taught, and I'll tell you what might go through my head at that moment. If I'm just sitting and doing nothing, oh man. You know what might go through my mind? Gosh, there's stuff you got to get done, man. There's people that need you. There's things that you need to do. You don't be useless. And that's what I'm sort of taught to think in a kind of false way. Now, it's not to say everybody's entitled to just sit around and do nothing all the time. No, we do need to work, but when we're done doing the work that needs to be done, we should very freely and openly and with a clear conscience enjoy those quiet moments. And if we've really taken care of all of our responsibilities, the more of those moments we have, the better. Now, if you are raising kids, you're not going to have a lot of those moments. If you're a parish priest, you're not going to have a lot of those moments. But there are certain lifestyles that are oriented towards maximizing that. That's kind of what a monastery is. That's what at least a contemplative convent is. That's what I think he's arguing. That's what Plato's academy was. That's what academic life, intellectual life, especially within the humanities, that's really what that's for. And in fact, he makes this really interesting distinction between two different types of science. This is on page 39. There are sciences that are applicable to ends outside themselves, towards the top of 39. But there are also the pure sciences practiced in a philosophical manner. So even in the world of science, and this is an absolute fact, go to any university that has these majors, engineering is one major, and engineers take physics classes, and they take a lot of them, and they take math classes, and they take a lot of them. Engineering, though, is about making stuff. So there's the engineering sort of department, and they have to take all these classes. And then there's the physics department. Why do engineers do what they do? So they can make stuff. It's a servile art. It's great. My dad's an engineer. It's a fantastic thing. It's one of the most important things in the world as far as necessity is concerned. But what's physics about? Why do people research in pure physics? Not because they're going to get anything out of it. Usually not. Is there amazing technology that comes from just studying pure physics? Absolutely. Everything that we're doing right now, this whole camera and internet and all that, is all because of like all kinds of cool 20th century physics that happened. But that's not the reason they did it. They didn't know that this stuff was going to come from it. They did it just because they want to understand. That's what we're talking about. That's contemplation. Okay. So sloth is this idea either that it's sort of this feeling that I just can't do it. Maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe I'm not worthy of it. Maybe I don't want it for whatever other reason. And so because of that, either I'm going to fall into a kind of anti-leisure where I'm going to spend all my time, even if it's not, well, I'm either going to spend all my time furiously working so that I can earn a feeling that I am of value because I'm making myself money or somebody else money, or I'm being useful to somebody else. And that's kind of making me feel like I deserve to be valued. That's kind of sad, right? We should already know that we have some kind of value just because we're human beings. On the other hand, sloth can also be, so it's weird that working too hard can be a form of sloth, but sloth can also be, I am avoiding. I'm not letting myself enjoy these moments. So I'm going to force myself to kind of do other stuff. And that's where we can fall into all kinds of bad habits. We can get addicted to things. That's kind of what drug use can be about sometimes, or alcohol use, pornography. It's that we need a constant stimulation that's really intense. It's kind of like, it's like you need to cover everything you eat with like the hottest possible hot sauce. I love hot sauce. I have like several different kinds right there for when I eat. But like, it's really intense and it kind of just dulls your senses. Whereas I'm just going to buy a good steak and I'm going to put some salt on that steak and I'm going to grill it or pan fry it. And that's a very subtle flavor, but it's so much better. But you need to allow yourself to taste it. And sloth can also take the form of, I'm just going to distract myself with all these kind of intense pleasures so that I don't just let myself exist. And these bad habits can actually contribute to us never really allowing ourselves to live life in that fullest sense. They're kind of taking the place of life. So that's how sloth is opposed to leisure. What is the relationship between leisure and worship? That's what section 5 of this is about. And he says, page 65, the soul of leisure, it can be said, lies in celebration. Celebration is the point at which 3 elements of leisure come to a focus: relaxation, effortlessness, and superiority of active leisure to all functions. I want to talk about effortlessness for a second. That's really what that's about. We don't need to sit there and strain and I have to sit and enjoy this sunset. That's the best way to ruin it. It's like, I'm going to sit and enjoy this company with my friends. There should not be a strain. It should just kind of happen without any effort. It should happen in a very literal sense, naturally, because it is your nature just overflowing and being what it is. That's what it means to do something naturally. What does that have to do with worship? There's a couple of different ways to think about this. One of the most important ones is sometimes it takes literally the authority of God to get people to stop working for a minute. And I think that's part of what's going on with the Sabbath law in the Old Testament, with the commandment about keep holy the Sabbath day and you shall not do no work on the Sabbath. Why does God need to command people not to work? Because a lot of people, maybe the majority of people, would just work themselves to death if you left them alone. And there's very little that could stop them from doing that. Why is that? Part of it because of greed, Part of it's because of like sometimes this feeling of that I'm not worth anything unless I'm doing something for somebody else. And it requires literally God to say, stop working and rest right now. And you're doing it because I commanded you to do it. And I'm greater than you are. It's kind of sad that it requires God to sometimes to threaten us, to even get us to rest a little bit. But I think that's the way a lot of people are built. What else, though? What else is the connection between leisure and worship? Well, again, what's leisure really about? It's about existing as the kind of being that I am and being receptive to the world as it is. But it's really incomplete to attempt to try to understand what kind of being I am without some reference to God, in whose image I'm made. And it's really incomplete to attempt to soak in, to listen to hear, to receive the world, reality, as it is, without any reference to the source of that reality, who is the creator. And so I think from both sides of leisure, there has to, it's naturally going to point us to God, and to worshiping God. And the point is, we do not worship God to get anything out of it. Or at least that's sort of the goal of worship. We praise God just to praise God. We thank God just to thank God. Now, can we pray for things too? Sure. We remember to pray this novena for this intention. I'm going to pray this chaplet because there's something, and I'm going to pray so I want to stay out of hell. All that is possible. But the reason we pray is just to worship God. Now, I teach philosophy for a living. Am I making money doing philosophy? Well, yeah, but that's not why I do it, or at least that's not why I'm supposed to do it. There's a kind of parallel there. The nature of prayer is that you do it just to do it. It's kind of like, why do you talk to your friends? I talk to my friends just to talk to my friends, just because I love them, and leisure is a kind of overflow of love. Okay, that's what's going on here. Now I'm going to leave the final optional lecture. I just have a lecture on prayer, and it goes through John Chrysostom's commentary on the Our Father, and there's a couple of other questions that from Aquinas about prayer. I think it's pretty good. I'll leave the link there. You can click it if you feel like it, okay? Last thing that I want to talk about is Aristotle's Metaphysics. 3 questions from there. How does Aristotle begin the Metaphysics? What does that mean? What is required for science and philosophy according to Aristotle? What are the attributes of the wise man, the wise person according to Aristotle? How does Aristotle begin the Metaphysics? I just literally want you to quote the line. The first line of the Metaphysics. All men, by nature, desire to know. Men doesn't mean males, it means human beings. All human beings, by nature, desire to know. What does it mean? It doesn't mean, people like knowing things. That's something that people like kind of naturally know. When he says all men, when Aristotle says the word all, he's about to give you a definition. And when he says all men by nature, he is about to tell you something about human nature. And so what he's saying when he says all men by nature desire to know, he is saying the desire to know is the defining characteristic of the human being. It is what makes us human. So all the other stuff, so it's really connected to the stuff we're talking about with leisure. The most natural desire, the most natural longing in our heart, more natural than the desire for food, because it's particularly human. It's human nature. Animals desire food too. The desire for food, the desire for sex, the desire for progeny, the desire for shelter, the desire for companionship, the desire for all kinds of other pleasures, the desire even for sleep. Those are all great, beautiful things, but we share all of those things with every other animal. But by human nature, our human desire is the desire to know. You could add to that the desire to love as well, because love and knowledge are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. Okay, willing and knowing are kind of 2 sides of the same coin. And so he continues, an indication of this is the delight we take in our senses, for even apart from their usefulness, they are loved for themselves, and above all others, the sense of sight, for not only with a view to action, but even when we are not doing anything, we prefer seeing to everything else. So he's saying a sign of this natural desire to know is how much fun it is to look at stuff. And he's right. Just looking at stuff is fun. Why do you think we go to museums and look at paintings? Looking at paintings is fun. Looking at an ocean or a sunset is fun. In movies, why do you think cinematography is such an important aspect of movies? You can tell a story with terrible cinematography. It doesn't really matter what the camera's pointing at, as long as the characters say and do what they do. But like just the way the picture is set up on the screen, there's something beautiful about that. There's something fun just about looking at something that's nicely ordered like that. And he's saying that's evidence that we want to know things because we enjoy seeing, and seeing is one of the most sort of important modes of knowing, is because we can see, and it brings us a lot of knowledge when we see things. And so that's kind of what contemplation is just giving into this desire to know. And ratio, this discursive knowledge, is sometimes required. We work our way to get to that conclusion. That's the straight line. But once we get to the conclusion, we just pause and we just know that conclusion. And I'm just going to sit there. I'm just going to think about this fact. Wow. Whatever it is. God created the world. Wow. My significant other loves me. That's a beautiful thing to sit and like think about. Wow, I am loved. God loves me. I'm just going to sit and think about that. That's amazing. Let me just think about that and just kind of soak that in. That's what's going on with all of this. So that's how Aristotle begins metaphysics. What does it mean? What is required for science and philosophy, according to Aristotle? What is a prerequisite for it? Page 36 of the PDF. I think you have the same page numbers as I do. Middle paragraph. At first, he who invented any art whatsoever went beyond the common perception. But as more arts were invented, and some were directed to the necessities of life, others to recreation, the inventors of the latter were naturally always regarded as wiser than the... Okay, end of that paragraph. First in the places where men begin to have leisure. That is why the mathematical arts were founded in Egypt, for there the priestly caste was allowed to be at leisure. In order to have pure science, in order to have knowledge for its own sake, I just want to know things just to know them. In order to have that, you need leisure. So this is one of the places where Joseph Pieper is getting this idea, this concept of leisure. Leisure is the thing that's required if you're going to do pure science or pure philosophy, just knowing for its own sake. And the people that are able to do that are the ones that have the luxury of not having to work all the time. And that's what he's talking about, this priestly class in Egypt. However, can even quote-unquote working people have a share in this? Absolutely. And the more of a share of you that you have of it, the better it is. And I'm going to make a suggestion to you. You do not need a ton of money to live a life of leisure. On the contrary, Aristotle makes a point in his book on politics. He says really wealthy people actually have less time on their hands because they have more property, more stuff to worry about, more employees, and because they have all this stuff, it's just they have way less time on their hands. And he says really poor people don't have much time on their hands either because they just have to work all the time just to be able to eat. And he says to have like kind of modest, like middle class, maybe even lower middle class. I've got an apartment. It's not expensive. I don't live in a very expensive part of the country. I've got a job, but I work, 40 hours a week. Besides that, I don't got a lot going on. And I'm not trying to get a Bentley, and I'm not trying to get super rich, and I'm not trying to get super famous. I'm just kind of happy where I'm at. I don't want to destroy your ambitions to go out and get the world, but like, you might live a much happier life kind of settling for financial mediocrity so that you have the time, the leisure to do beautiful human things. Whereas if, no, I have to own my own house and I need a nice car and I need this and I need that, the second those things become needs, You're going to have to work a lot more and make a lot more money in order to get them, which means you're going to actually have less time to really just enjoy being alive. And so that's kind of a point that Aristotle makes in another work. But what's required for, at least for science and philosophy, is leisure. Okay? What are the attributes of the wise man, of a wise person, according to Aristotle? The wise man, on page 37. I don't even know why I'm doing this, but something to do, I guess it's fine. The wise man. This is the first paragraph on page 37, a few lines down. We suppose first, then, number one, the wise man knows all things insofar as that's possible. You can't know everything, but to the degree that you can, the wise man knows as much as he can. So I'm going to sort of sound sexist, but women can do this just as well. Number two, he who can learn things that are difficult and not easy for men to know. So not just sense perception. What does a wise person know? The wise person doesn't just know that tree is over there and that tree is 6 feet tall. The wise person knows about all trees. He can tell you something about every single tree, not just the things you can sense. Again, he who is more exact and more capable of teaching, that's 3 and 4. So the wise person is precise when he knows things and speaks, and and the wise person is capable of teaching others. If you can't teach somebody something that you know, maybe you don't really know it as well as you think you do. And that which is, of all the sciences, that which is desirable in its own account, now we're getting back to this topic. The wise man knows things that are worth knowing just to know. Not so much the stuff that's useful. The wise man knows about just life in general. He might also know about plumbing, but plumbers aren't always wise men. You see what I mean? It's not so much about the practical stuff. It's about sort of the meaning and purpose of life. It's about the bigger things. Okay? And then finally, the wise man must not be ordered, but must order. The wise man must, because he is, the way that he lives is the reason why we are alive, is to sort of live that way of thinking and thoughtfulness. Things should be ordered to him. We should do things so that we can become like the wise man. He shouldn't be subordinate to other things. Okay. The next paragraph, he makes an argument that the science of metaphysics, this is all from Aristotle's Metaphysics, by the way, that the science of metaphysics fulfills all 6 of these attributes of the wise man in a perfect way, or in the most perfect way. Go to page 38. And I guess I'll just end with this, and I'll just kind of let you guys go. And there's the optional lecture, like I said, but you don't have to listen to that. Some nice things to kind of wrap up with. This science of metaphysics, which is really just the contemplation of the deepest realities of the universe, including God, according to Aristotle. This is not a science of production. It's not something, we're not going to make anything when we do metaphysics or when we contemplate. It's clear even from the history of the earliest philosophers, for it is owing to their wonder that men both now begin and at first began to philosophize. They wondered originally at these obvious difficulties. And so he's saying, why do we do philosophy? Why are we doing metaphysics? Why do we contemplate? Because we wonder about stuff. Not because we need it at all, for anything. Again, it's useless. But because it's useless, we do it just to do it. It makes it a better thing to do. And he says it's the same source of the lover of myth. It's the same wonder that causes us to do philosophy and to contemplate as it is for us to write mythology and to write poetry and things like that. Last thing, I guess I'm just going to end with this. This activity, according to Aristotle, who lived 300-something years before Christ, he says, bottom of 38, this seems to be beyond human power, this ability to contemplate. And he says, on page 39, about 8 lines down, this science of metaphysics, which is occupied in the contemplation of the deepest realities, he says this is called the divine science. Why? Number one, well, I'm going to reverse the order. Why is this called the divine science? Number one, well, because the deepest thing for us to contemplate is God. So it's the divine science because the object of metaphysics is eventually going to be God. But second, and I actually find this extremely beautiful, this is the kind of activity that God must do. This is what Aristotle is saying. He's saying to just think and contemplate and just exist in contemplation and in thoughtfulness of reality and this kind of, in this activity, Aristotle imagines that must be what God is doing all the time. And that's absolutely beautiful. And I think he's got a point, and I think he's right in doing that. And so he says, we begin the next paragraph. What we're doing right now begins in wonder, but it ends in the opposite of wonder. What's the opposite of wonder is contemplation. So at first, man, I wonder what's going on. And I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to analyze and do logic and do this and that and make all this kind of strain to finally get to the truth of the matter. Once I get to the truth, and remember, the truth is formed in a proposition. I have this judgment. This is that. Once I get to the truth, wonder's job is done. Wonder's job is to kind of push us through this ratio, this kind of rationalizing or this reasoning. Once wonder's done, how does it end? It ends with contemplation. Now I'm no longer wondering, and now I know. And now that I know, I'm going to sit and contemplate this truth that I know. Okay? So that is my pitch for all of you to switch your major to philosophy. I hope some of you end up being plumbers and welders and stuff. We need all that too. But even if you're a plumber and a welder and a working person and you raise kids and do all this really important work that everybody needs to do, I hope you find the time in your life to do, this kind of contemplation and to have this kind of leisure. All right. Peace out.